And once again, as I showed in that animation, there's a certain, there are elements that run through. This is not throwing away the baby with the bathwater and starting from scratch. It's moving things along and letting them evolve in ways that are appropriate and relevant. Now, you can see in this example from a recent issue of the paper that the typefaces are used all throughout the paper in a variety of ways. There's the big stuff, there's the small stuff. Times Classic, which is the one that was introduced back in 2002, is still what's used for the body text. But this sharper, simplified version of the family, the whole Times Modern family, is used throughout and mixed and matched in different ways, and addresses a lot of other situations, like all of the supplements that are part of almost any major modern newspaper brand. These sections that come in on various days that have to have an identity of their own and speak in a certain voice and say a certain tone, but they still need to feel like they're part of the whole family. And the typography really allows this to all hold together in that way. You can get a different vibe out of each of these sections. You know, arts and entertainment and the review have their own feel, but you get the sense that they're related. And it's the typography that's basically doing that, because the content and the look of these sections in terms of layout are actually quite different. And a slightly more removed member of this family is the Times Magazine. This weekly magazine that most newspapers do they operate from a little bit sort of a slower voice editorially, since they come out once in a while. The stories are often developed a little bit more. And this is an opportunity to handle the typography in a very different way. So once again, the Times worked with Monotype to develop a new family specifically for the magazine. And the idea for the family for the magazine was it could be a little bit more refined and a little bit more delicate. And again, these features hold together with the rest of the family, but they do some things that are different and more surprising, and have a little bit lighter touch in many ways. Now, aside from just the stuff that gets printed and goes into the paper that people see every day, the typography has allowed the paper to carry these notes of what they're all about into all other media. This is an advertising campaign from a few years back that when I would see this in the tube riding around, for instance, it was immediately obvious to me what was going on. And this is long before I had anything to do with Monotype. If you break it down, this is a typeface, a name, and random pictures slightly related to current events. But with those simple elements, it drove home this important message about who the Times was. It was building upon this association that people get day after day, soaking in the tone, soaking in the vibe of what everything's about with the typography, and just saying like, okay, the Times, it's clear, I get it. And even moving past print, the digital versions of what the Times are doing are becoming a bigger and bigger part of who they are. Again, this is a situation that's common to many big newspaper brands, probably all of them at this point, and a lot of other forms of printed media who are making this shift. So in the iPad edition of the Times, once again, the typography is a key component of what's going on. They're trying to have a very close relationship between the layout of the paper and the organization of the paper and what's happening in the iPad app. There are adjustments to the layout, and there's not as much content happening on, say, the front page or any one of the individual pages, but they want the feeling to carry through. There's a lot of curation that goes into what the paper looks like, and they didn't want to abandon that and ask their readers to figure out an entirely new experience in the digital app. And the typography, again, becomes a big part of this. The iPad app is using embedded fonts right in there. So these aren't full-size JPEG pages or PDF pages in there. It's text. It reflows when the orientation switches from vertical to horizontal. And the type is really crisp since they're using embedded font outlines right in there. This is an advertisement from the paper for the iPad app, from showing the way the app looks on that day. when that was the front page of the paper. So they really are pushing this notion that there's a tight relationship, they work together, this is a different medium for getting exactly what you would expect to get out of the Times, a new way of engaging with the content, but the content being what you're used to, what you expect, what you trust. And because of being able to work with their own typefaces and have them embedded in the iPad app, you get this really nice rendering on screen for doing all of the stuff that they do in the various parts of the paper. You can use the display typography, and in this case it's enhanced by being able to show clearer photos, larger photos, so they can be a little bit more generous in that regard. But some of the more complex navigation and typographical layouts carry through really well. Now, the other big digital aspect of the paper is the website, obviously. And here, they don't have the same luxury of working with their own custom typefaces that are theirs and no one else gets to use. There's a certain compromise in working with a website if they're stuck with the system fonts. In this case, they're using Georgia for just about all of the live text, and they're combining that with using Times Modern rendered as graphics for key elements for, say, the navigational elements and the masthead, and certain big display elements like things in the sidebar. And it's a compromise, but it works pretty well. By using the custom typeface that people associate with the paper and give people a frame of reference for where they are in the paper, they establish what the space is, they establish that it's within the Times. And in the smaller elements, it works. Georgia has enough design concepts behind it that relate to the Times typefaces that they work together. But one of the bigger issues that comes out of this compromise is the fact that they've got graphics mixed with live text. I took this screenshot off an iPhone 4 because it very vividly points out how this begins to fall apart in certain examples of use. When you zoom up, the graphic elements begin to fall apart and you lose that sense of the clarity and the authority that are so important to what the paper wants to convey with its use of the typefaces. So the moment is changing for how fonts that get deployed in situations like this. For a company like the Times that is placing so much emphasis on its typography and what the typography can offer the paper, there's a moment now by considering what will happen with web fonts to allow the website to do the same thing as the iPad, to draw on all of this value, all of this built-up association and this investment in what the typography can do, and bring it onto the website. So you get all the functionality that people like out of live fonts by having real text that can be crawled by search engines, that can be selected and copied, and that a reader can really engage with. But now it can also be displayed in the text. And there are a lot of issues in deploying something like web fonts for a site as complex as the Times, and we're certainly hoping that we can keep talking to them about it and really see it come through. But there's a lot of opportunity in the possibilities of web fonts that build upon everything that the paper has been doing already and everything that has justified this investment they've put into typography to do the job right for them in implicit and explicit ways over the years. And what's interesting about this particular moment with web fonts is that everyone is racing to figure it out and racing to do it. And for an organization like the Times that has put so much behind its typography and allowed that voice to carry it through, there's an opportunity for them to be in a real leadership position, I think, in terms of them showing other people what the web can be like with the use of typography by taking that next step forward. Thank you, and do you want to know anything else about the Times and the typefaces and all that fun stuff? I can also feel the geekier type questions now that I've gotten through the basic story. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, thank you very much.